Well, hello, welcome to Men's Couch. I'm excited for this topic. This topic hits home for me. It's just, yeah, I'm excited to talk about gender norms and how men go about in society in expressing that. So, yeah.
Sorry. Hey, Micah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, today we're going to talk about the blog that you did on your other brothers. And when I read it, I felt that it really related to me growing up, kind of like around high school, people always assumed that I was gay because I guess more quote unquote feminine in a way, and I wear like pink, so as I am today, so people assumed a lot about me, and it just felt to me it was offensive. Not the fact that they assumed that I was gay, but the fact that they assumed something based on like a narrow mindset of masculinity. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it looks good on you.
So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, for those of you who don't know who are listening, I'm a blogger on Your Other Brothers. I'm named Eugene Heffron, and I talk about a whole variety of subjects. When it comes to faith and sexuality, and yeah, like the recent one I wrote, I kind of definitely wanted to tackle the subject of gender norms, trying to as best I can, look at it from such a nuanced perspective and middle ground perspective. Like that thing is, in this day and age where everyone's so divided over everything, that can be hard to do. So it was just one of those subjects where I wanted to. There's kind of two extremes when it comes to gender norms. You have like the overly rigid gender norms, and then there's like the kind of anything goes kind of perspective. So it's one of those things where I wanted to examine those in between, basically.
yeah, I think you mentioned a good thing is that mentioning like these nuanced subjects can step on a lot of people's toes that like you said that go on one side of the spectrum and then another side, and it could kind of sort of create like a conflict, and really it's not really about conflict, it's really about how can we have an authentic sense of masculinity where people feel that they can express themselves authentically, but we're not saying that we're going on the other side of becoming women. We're still maintaining our sense of masculinity and just its like different forms. I think there is a problem with some men that think that we can only express our sense of masculinity in only like a very limited box, if you know what I'm saying. It's just so limited. And if you go like a little bit outside of that, like me wearing pink, then all of a sudden it says something about who you are. And it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the thing is that one thing that academics will often point out is how gender norms tend to, have a lot of basis in culture and that kind of thing, and tend to change over time. Like the primary example always brought up was like in the past, pink was considered a boy's color and blue a girl's color, and now today it's just completely the opposite. And it's true, and it's important to look at that and acknowledge that and realize that a lot of our norms are not um, eternal or timeless, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
But at the same time, like one thing that I started off my blog with was that several years ago there was that big uproar when Harry Styles was photographed and on the photo of a magazine where he was wearing like this kind of lacy women's dress and everything. And of course, you can imagine people on both sides of the spectrum, going crazy about it. You have the more liberal spectrum saying like, "Wow, this was so stunning! How brave of him!" Blah, 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 blah. And conservative spectrum saying, "Oh, this is gross. That's so stupid." Blah, 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 blah. And for me personally, I was not impressed one way or the other,
Hmm.
because I think that kind of leads into more about what my general point of the blog is. It's just like where it's like, yes, it's important to like re-examine these gender norms, but I just don't. I just think it's not enough to just simply reverse them, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense. Like you just throw a
Yeah.
man in a frilly women's dress, just to parade, pat yourself on the back for challenging gender norms and that kind of thing. And it's not creative to me. It's lazy, and you have to put way more thought into it, which I'll get into.
Yeah. Yeah. I see what you're saying because not everyone is going to go in, wear a dress, and people need to feel that they can relate to what's ever being expressed. Some men struggle with like for me for years struggle with like expressing their personality. I'm very sensitive. I'm like an HSP, INFJ type. So I have like a motherly presence, if you will, as what my friends have told me. I have a motherly presence. So it isn't accepted to have that in the realm of masculinity, but that's just because like our culture prioritizes stoicism and other things like related to that. I've never been that way because I'm just naturally sensitive, and that's how it led me to even making this podcast, is because I am sensitive and I want to be a psychotherapist, and that kind of involves a lot of having high sensitivity and being an empath. So that for me, I think I read a book. I have it right here, actually. I read this book, Highly Sensitive. I don't know if you can say it, Highly Sensitive Man. Yeah, I read this book, and it's actually eye opening about how men can accept if they're an HSP, how they can accept that. And for me, it's been kind of like a journey of accepting that, because sensitivity is related to women and is not always talked about when it comes to men.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I read a different book about sensitivity. Listen to that, and I related so much to it because I'm definitely a sensitive person as well. Um, which can be hard because yeah, for masculine standards, it's not considered like a masculine ideal for men, I guess you could say. But at the same time, well, a lot of it I really related to when it comes to being sensitive. Like the idea of if I see someone angry and upset and they're not yelling at me, they're yelling at someone else. Weirdly enough, I sometimes feel kind of hurt, like I'm the one being yelled at, if you will.
Yeah,
You know, and it's unpleasant that way, which is weird. Like even if I'm not the person receiving their anger, it's almost like I'm feeling it still that they're yelling at me. And like the idea is like you want to like, in a sense, maybe kind of like create like an invisible glass wall for yourself. So like maybe the negativity of another person doesn't affect you and that kind of thing when you're sensitive and everything, and all sorts of stuff like that. And it was really good. It was really interesting. And a lot of it I related to.
yeah, that could be hard to do, to have that boundary with the world around you, especially if you're sensitive. But maybe for years, sensitivity has been seen as feminine, but it's just, I see my sensitivity as a strength. And I think the narrative around it needs to be changed so that people can feel more comfortable expressing their sensitivity. Even like my hobbies, I'm into gardening. I I love fashion. So it's just all that stuff is like associated with women do that. But it's just over time, I didn't care anymore, because it's just like, this doesn't make sense. If we think about it, there is a distinction between men and women, but that distinction kind of gets blurry when it comes to culture.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in some respects, like, it affects me kind of negatively because, like, I'm in the art world. I'm a creative type.
Hmm.
And recently I went back to school for a design degree and illustration. And basically, I was like, almost all of my classes, I was the only guy, basically. It was just the
Interesting.
whole department is just completely dominated by women. And yeah, I was pretty outnumbered. But, one thing I'm like fascinated yet infuriated to find out is that the art scene was once considered a man's profession.
That's interesting.
Yeah, like in the early 1900s, like that was considered a masculine job, a man's profession, and that kind of thing. And it's just, now it's considered more of a women's profession. Now it's like done a total 180. And, and admittedly, it kind of makes me mad because it's like I
Yeah,
don't have anything wrong with like more women being in the art world, but it's like, could it not be just like the complete opposite where I'm the only guy, I mean, could it at
yeah,
least be 50-50? And a lot of times it makes me feel it's often left me feeling pretty like, well, I don't want to say outcast, just out of place and, and disconnected. And I think a lot of times modern people kind of get it into their minds that that's just the way it is, or
mhm,
women are just way more into art than men. And, and they think it's always been that way because it's always been that way as far as they can remember in their lifetime, Yeah.
yeah. I relate to that because in my classes, it's mostly predominantly women, which is not a problem. I Very few men. If there are men, they're usually like in sports psychology, in like the counseling program. But in the counseling program, it's mostly women. Again, I don't have a problem with that. It's just like in arts was primarily men at one point. I think it was that way in psychology around like Sigmund Freud, that era. I think it was like mostly, it was like spearheaded by men, and now there's a lot of female therapists, which I think is starting to change a little bit, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, in some respects, it's kind of like an overcorrection, unfortunately, kind of trying to overcorrect for like, the having things be men only in the past and that kind of thing. And now it's like almost kind of like
Mhm.
almost doing a total 180 where it's almost like completely women in a lot of these fields, and hardly any men. And again, ironically, I think like it ends up gendering things more, I guess you could say, or
Mhm.
stereotyping things more in a lot of ways, Now it's like, again, like I mentioned, like the idea of like, the arts is becoming seen as more of a women's thing and considered like people think it's always been that way, or maybe even in some respects kind of subconsciously thinking it's for women only or
Right. I think, yeah, when we think of arts, it's art being produced by women. I think we don't really think of men. We don't think of stuff like that associated with men in the at least now, at least,
Mhm,
but like you said, it's more of like it's more historical and it's more based on the context of what's going on in society right now. And that limits a lot of men and also makes them like for me for years, it makes them feel a sense of lacking a sense of masculinity because they go outside of the cultural norm at that time. For
mhm.
me, um because I'm more sensitive and I hate sports, it affected me a little bit because I felt that I couldn't necessarily connect with other men in the context of sports. So it made me feel like, okay, am I less of a guy because I'm not into these hobbies? But that's more of like a modern thing. It's not actually doesn't have anything to say about who you are as a man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I like baseball, so there's that. I have that stereotypical trait, if you want to call it that. But I mean, I wouldn't call it like hardcore, and but I'm not. I'm definitely. I've never been like super into most other sports. It's a fine thing for guys to like sports and be into sports, of course, nothing wrong with that, or the men to be into sports. It's just, I think it's just when. Again, we see it as acceptable for men only to be into sports, I guess you could say, and that's like the only acceptable thing.
It's
You know.
very, I would say black and white when it comes to, what you're interested in or how you express yourself. And
Hmm.
I think there definitely needs to be a distinction between men and women, like I said before, but if it's like affecting you personally, I think people should question as they uh, go through their adulthood or go through their life, they should question things that they have internalized that aren't actually wrong, like, wearing pink or just being more expressive. Like I'm naturally more expressive with my emotions. I People tell me like I smile a lot, so I think that's a good thing. And I'm not super stoic. I've known like some of my friends to be very just like poker face and not express themselves, that can be seen as, a trait that women possess, but men possess as well. I'm a guy and I'm very expressive.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell. That's the problem when we do have, like, these really stiff gender norms and that kind of thing, and how it can really, be confining and that kind of thing. But on the other hand, we also kinda like I've mentioned before, we also have that other extreme, which is just to like, "Oh, let's just have" let's just have men act like women. You have, like, that other spectrum and how it is with drag. Now, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I've never been interested in drag, and I
Mhm.
personally don't get it. It's just like I think like my issue with it is that it's just well, I mean, it's basically guys acting like well, acting and dressing and having makeup like women, basically very stereotypically like women. I don't get it. And it's just like I think that's
And I've never actually watched it before, so I'm thinking, like, in my mind, is it like, are they poking fun at the things that are stereotypical for women? I think when we go to the other extreme, then we kind of like it defeats the purpose of the whole sense of expressing your gender.
yeah. Yeah. In some respects it's almost kind of like mocking the opposite gender.
I personally don't know what the purpose of drag is. I've never watched it, so it's like people that like participate in it or watch it maybe need to question what's the purpose of this? What purpose does it serve? Like, is it mocking? And that's not to say like it is, but, I think we need to question those things when it comes to certain extremes.
Yeah, but also it's like when it comes to like maybe some gender bending, you want to have like substance behind it, if you will,
Yeah.
rather than just, throwing a dress on a man and calling it a day. Because I remember several years ago, like when the whole drag queen story hour thing was being a big controversy in the news and everything, like I saw several people post on Facebook this one meme that said, "Oh, you have all always enjoyed drag and too ashamed to admit it." And it showed a bunch of pictures of like, Robin Williams as Mrs. Doubtfire or Dustin Hoffman as Tootsie or Bugs Bunny dressing up like a woman, to get away from Elmer Fudd. But at the same time, I'm like, I
Those
don't think
episodes
that.
are actually funny.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, I'm like, well, there's substance behind all of those. It's not just guys dressing like women for shock value. It's like
Mhm.
Robin Williams, he was dressing as Mrs. Doubtfire because he wanted to be closer to his kids, and did that as a disguise, and then hijinks ensued. Basically, same with Tootsie. That was Dustin Hoffman. Like the reason he did that was because he was trying to get cast on the show that he wanted to be on, so he created this female persona to fool everyone and do that, and hijinks ensue. Or in Bugs Bunny's case, like he's dressing up to disguise himself to get away from Elmer Fudd, and hijinks ensue and that kind of thing. So you see what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's substance behind it. There's reasons for it, and it's played for laughs. It's for comedy. And they also like I guess you could say poked at gender norms, but in an interesting way, a way that made you think a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It involved, like, a sense of art, and it allowed people to think about, the context of it. It wasn't just doing it just to do it, and I think, this a thought that's coming to mind is a lot of, men that I know, they, wear black nail polish, and I think it's like I don't know if it's like a Gen Z thing. I know my generation, a lot of men, uh, have black nail polish, and find that interesting because I guess these are not, like, any guy does it, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. It's not like
Yeah,
it's not artsy people, it's like any guy does it. So, I find that quite interesting that that's more new.
well, I mean, I think in my generation, I'm a millennial. In my generation, like it wasn't unheard of for guys to do black nail polish, but if they were wearing black nail polish, that was usually because they were like a goth or an emo. Basically, they were in that kind of sub crowd, and so they would do that.
Yeah.
They were just basically putting any surface they could and making it black. So there wasn't, there was that, but like I said, I think it was just only in that context of goth, if you will. Like I think that was maybe kinda their justification for it was just because they like the color black so much that they wanna put it everywhere.
Yeah, and, like, now a lot of men are doing it. It's not just, people that are, like, in that goth scene, that goth culture. It's like everyone's doing it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, and it's like well, the thing is that I think the other part that bothers me a little bit is, well, at least when it comes to some of these, a lot of them are very surface level, I guess if you wanted to put it that
Mhm.
way, like, only in terms of aesthetics, but not much else.
Yeah.
In my blog, I put a link to a video, like where you can kind of gender bend, but in an interesting way, in a way where there's like thought put behind it. Is like, well, there was this show that used to play in Las Vegas called Le Rev at the Wynn Hotel, and it was kind of like a Cirque du Soleil show, but it wasn't. It was different, but it had acrobatics in it and stuff, and but it had these characters in the show called the Red Men, and they're basically these men that essentially they were wearing dresses, but the thing is that they kind of had like that Eastern battle dress look, if you will, with like the sash around the midsection and everything.
Okay.
But also like the dresses would be red. I mean, that's why they're called the Red Men. And but they would also be like really ragged and torn up looking, basically. And
Interesting.
they're only wearing those, but like their upper torsos and arms and everything would be completely bare, so that you see their muscles and pecs and everything above the waistline of their dresses. But the thing is that it generally looked cool. It was like when they would do a lot of these flips, they'd be doing that, this dance routine where they're doing all these acrobatics and they're flipping around and flying around, and like their dresses would just sort of flail out like crazy, like these red streaks and everything, and seeing this fabric going everywhere, and it honestly looked like fire. And which looked really cool. I mean, it generally looked neat, and just seeing them flipping around and you see just sort of flaming red going everywhere and and you can see the video on my blog if you look on it there. But that's like, okay, now that's actually where it looks cool. And in a way, it sort of almost like complements the masculinity of the performers, if you will.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because it's not a frilly stereotypical female dress like what Harry Styles was wearing. It's this was like something more unique. So I mean, that's just only on a visual level, like as a metaphor, if you will, for what I'm talking about when it comes to like challenging gender norms a little more. Like you want to like have that substance, if you will, behind it, put thought into it, and that kind of thing, and how you look into it.
Yeah, I definitely yeah, that's this is very interesting. For me, I'm a very pink guy. I wear pink shirts and pink hats. As for me, it's more of just um like a form of expression, but also um I think it's more like accepted for black men to wear pink in black urban culture. I'm not sure 100%, but I think black men get away with a lot more when it comes to expression and comes when it comes to fashion, at
Mm.
least what I've seen at my college campus. But I think just in a general sense, when it comes to color, yeah, I definitely found out that it was like in my personality psych class, we were talking like the history of pink and was actually a masculine color, like probably 100 years ago, but it's somehow it switched probably around post World War II time, if I'm not mistaken, but it's actually interesting because,
Yeah.
now I think now it's like a mixed baggage. It's like, if you wear pink in certain contexts, it's like, what is your sexual orientation? People always like wonder that, but I think it's just like for me, it's just like a color that I really like. It's like that's really what it is. Hopefully, we can kind of challenge our narratives about that.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting you brought up the racial element because I think it's kind of like that. A lot of black men will wear earrings, or like
Yeah,
even diamond earrings and that kind of thing, and that's kind of socially accepted as masculine. But admittedly, like when white men do it, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, even I kind of can't help but be like, oh, they're probably gay, if they're
yeah,
wearing those earrings. I mean, because I mean, I hate to be that way. I hate to be judgmental like that, but most of the time I do kind of end up being correct, to be honest.
yeah,
But again, that could be a more recent cultural shift and that kind of thing, or cultural indicator, or what have you. I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I don't really know how recent that is or what. But that is kind of interesting. Again, there is kind of that a little bit of that racial difference, though, because I mean, if I see a black guy with earrings, I'm not gonna probably not gonna think anything about it. But if I see a white guy, then well, So
yeah.
yeah.
There definitely is a definite like cultural even within certain cultures or ethnic backgrounds. It's definitely some things are more normalized in African American culture. There's a stereotype that all black men are good at sports. I'm not good at sports at all. Like I don't like sports.
Hmm.
And, especially basketball, people like assume that. And my friends have joked with me about that, but it's not how, that's just not who I am. African American men, like what I've noticed, definitely get away with a lot more things when it comes to fashion and expressing ourselves. Right now, what's popular is rhinestones on different things, like I guess mostly on shirts. So you'll see like black men have like rhinestones on like the logo of shirts, and to some people that could seem as feminine, but to people in the African American community, it's just a form of expression. So it's like we said, it's like where are we kind of internalizing certain narratives? Where do they come from? And are they inherently wrong? I think people have that fear of, misrepresenting their identity if they kind of go outside of the norm of it.
Hmm. That is interesting. When you see something so heavily associated and partaken in by a certain culture to the point where it's just like, well, I'm not a part of that culture, so therefore I don't do that, or I don't want, people to label me as being a part of or like that culture and that kind of thing. I even see, more progressive leaning people will do the same thing. Will do kind of even like in a backhanded way, kind of, I've seen that a lot. They'll say like, "Oh, that's so gay," but oh, there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, it's totally okay to be gay, but that's so gay. That's so gay. I'm not gay like that. I like boobs. I'm not, it's you get kind of that
So
backhanded thing. So
I have a couple of questions. So
yeah.
did that, like, sort of the terminology of that so gay, that existed, like, when you were, like, going through high school and adolescence, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Oh
for
yeah,
millennials,
yeah,
that existed. So, like, I'm
yeah.
just wondering, like, how far back that stretched, because I think even my parents' generation that existed, I'm just, like, wondering, like, where did this policing of men become common when they're, like, going through adolescence and adulthood, like, of that a mindset of, that's so gay, even though it's like I think, even, like, the term gay, the word gay, like, it used to mean, like, I'm a big listener of, like, 60s music. I love 60s music, and a lot of the songs have the word gay in it, but it's actually, like, actually means happy.
Right.
And then I think, like, later on I think it meant feminine, and then more so recent is more of, like, feminine and there's something about your sexual orientation. So I think it kind of shifted, even, like, the language shifted, but it's used in, like, a derogatory way a lot of
Uh,
times.
well, I don't know how far back it goes. I mean, I can say I was in middle school and high school in the early 2000s, and yeah, that word was used a lot. But I think it was just generally. I think it was just since we were just young kids and didn't really know that much about how things worked. I think gay was just kind of used as instead of lame, so saying something's lame, or
Yeah.
it wasn't like entirely directly meant to be like something that's feminine or effeminate or strictly homosexual in nature. I think it was just another short-term word to mean something's lame or not cool or what have you, or but I think once you got into high school, then it started to shift maybe a little more in that direction. Um,
Mhm.
and actually one thing that's kind of funny is like a more recent like kind of gender norm thing was like yeah, in high school like that back in those days, you wore baggy cargo shorts basically, and they had to extend past the knee. Anything that went above the knee was kind of considered short shorts, and short shorts were considered gay, frankly. And but it's kind of funny because now I see guys all the time wearing short shorts, and masculine guys, dude bro masculine guys wearing short shorts like at the gym or what have you that go way up the thigh, and I'm just
That's really funny. I think
yeah.
it's like yeah, I think it's definitely, like, a Gen Z thing. It's definitely, like, normal for men to wear shorts, like, definitely, like, high up, and even, like, which is also you mentioned cargo pants is also a thing right now, which is really funny.
Mhm.
So, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
make you feel old, but, like, it's also a thing. I think it's, like
Yeah.
definitely noticed that, like, trends recycle because, like, those shorts were, like, popular in the 1980s, I feel like.
Mhm.
So,
Short shorts, you mean? Or
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you see, like, or in the '70s, like you see tennis players wearing those. I mean, they practically look like tidy whities. Honestly, they were really short shorts, and that was like a big '70s and yeah, an '80s thing, And so yeah, then it regressed, and then it's back again. Now it's back in style. So yeah,
Yeah.
what goes around comes around, I guess. So, but so
Yeah.
quickly though. I mean, you know.
I think what matters is historical and cultural context. There are things that were feminine like 20, 30 years ago, or even like 10 years ago that is now just so normalized right now. It's just a lot of things change. Who knows? Maybe like pink will be a masculine color again, but it's very interesting. And what really ticks me off is people like people assuming things about my sexuality because of, how I carry myself. I talk a
Mhm.
lot with, you can't see now, but I talk a lot with my hands. And I also guess I have a higher voice. People have said that I have a therapist voice, which is funny because I want to be a therapist. So I've gotten the "Are you gay?" questions, and it's annoying, not because of not having anything to do with like sexual orientation, but of again, like I said, like that narrow mindset of who people can be, like in terms of how we express our manhood.
It is interesting. I think like Well, I think one thing I've noticed, I think the reason a lot of the gay men who like act stereotypically feminine, I guess you could say, like one of the main reasons for that is often because growing up, they grow up with like a lot of girls as friends, basically.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of like, since they hang out in their only social circle is just nothing but girls, I think a lot of times those, those stereotypical cultural female mannerisms and way of speaking and that kind of thing, I think that tends to rub off on them because they say like basically you will have like a lot of people's, mannerisms or ways of speaking and things like that, they do rub off on you like subconsciously, and
Yeah.
you start talking like them after a while. Similar like why you might have like a similar, you may talk similar to your parents and everything. It's not like totally due to genetics. It's because you spend a lot of time with them, and so a lot of like the way they speak, talk, and act kind of
Yeah.
subconsciously rubs off on you. And sure enough, you're starting to say things just like them. So,
Yeah.
um,
Um, and then like on the other side, I've met people that, have same-sex attraction or are identify as gay, but they don't have any of the stereotypical traits that people associate with people that are same-sex attracted. So I think
mhm,
that men express themselves different. Like every guy expresses themselves differently, and there's even like a lot of myths about the stereotypical gay man, and there's myths about how straight men express themselves.
mhm. Yeah, and yeah, yeah, my experience, riding on your other brothers and being part of that community and meeting so many of the guys, it's like, yeah, I've met so many that are just across the board, so many that are stereotypical and, I guess you could say are stereotypically gay and some that are like I wouldn't have guessed if I met them in public and not known them, you know? It just goes all over the place and it's interesting like that. And again, like, I said, you do kinda get a lot of stereotyping in the media and, well,
Yeah,
some like I said, there is kind of that backhanded, like, they think they're being progressive about it, but in a way, they're only just like promoting stereotypes more. Because, like, in the early 2000s, oh man, there was so many comedy movies that made a lot of gay jokes that you can tell they thought they were being progressive about it. They thought they
yeah,
were like, but no, they were just like portraying every stereotypical, gay stereotype under the sun, basically. And it's kind of that's another thing that's kind of funny seeing how that's evolved a little bit. So it's interesting.
yeah. I think I'm curious of like what are the stereotypes of people that have same-sex attraction or of how they express themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think like the main thing I see right now is like basically if you see a guy that just kind of has the mannerisms and speaking style of like a teenage girl, basically,
Okay.
the oh my gosh, yes kind of way of speaking. Starting every single one of their sentence with oh my gosh, and basically, or that kind of thing. Oh my gosh, no way. And talking like adding an extra at the end of a lot of words that he's and by the way, that's kind of like a female way of speaking. I noticed has not died over the past 20 years. I remember girls talking like that in middle school. Like, no way, ew, stop, no way, that kind of thing. And that's funny. That's like a way of speaking. I swear it just won't die. It's
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a guy kind of speaking similar, or I guess maybe this is more of an the old-fashioned gay lip stereotype, talking in a nasally voice,
Yeah, what did that
having a
like, what
lip.
is, like, the whole lisp thing?
I don't
I
know,
never understood that.
honestly. I don't know where that comes from or why some of them talk that way. I mean, that's not a particular female way of speaking with a lisp. I honestly don't know. That's interesting. I never thought about it, but that's something I've seen a lot, the "Oh my gosh, super" kind of way of speaking. So I don't know. I don't know where that comes from, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's, like yeah, because I don't for me, I definitely don't fit, like, I guess, like, the straight guy persona, if you will.
Mhm.
Which like what even is that? I guess like and another thing, neither does my roommate Alex. He doesn't either. And we've both, had people assume that we're gay because of our close friendship and also because just our mannerisms. Like but we're straight. It's just our mannerisms go against the straight male, I guess what archetype? I don't know, for lack of a better word, archetype. In high school, I got that a lot. Not so much at my university. It's maybe like it's more quiet. I think as you get further into adulthood, it's more of like a quiet questioning of someone. Um, but yeah, I definitely have gotten a lot of that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and, well, honestly, I think in a lot of respects, a lot of just the regular gay culture doesn't help with that either because I think they like to really, really, really promote the gay stereotype. if you will. You know, it's you get that, you know, and play it up like crazy deliberately, if you will. And I think in a lot of ways that just I don't think that really helps anyone, in my opinion. It's just
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think they do it just for the sake of being again, another one of the aspects of just doing it for the sake of being rebellious and that kind of thing. You have that aspect of just trying to be rebellious, but I think again, it just kind of still kind of promotes gay stereotypes and you know, I think it does kind of promote labeling. I think. And that kind
Yeah,
of
it
thing.
does.
So, in a lot of ways, maybe in a lot of respects, that maybe like they'll kind of claim random things as gay and that kind of thing, and try to integrate it into gay culture and that kind of thing. And that's kind of another thing that I'm not big on either. I kind of wish wasn't a thing. And because if anything, like I think it just makes regular straight guys more insecure about how they present themselves and stick to maybe their stereotypes even more, and that kind of thing. And I think like the biggest issue when it comes to like what's considered masculine or feminine or even gay behavior is like, and this is the subject that just fascinates me to no end, is just how in the past men were way more comfortable to be physically affectionate with each other, and all those
That's quite
photos.
interesting.
Yeah, and all those photos were documented on that Art of Manliness article, the History of Male Friendship articles, and showed how physically affectionate that they would be with each other, how emotionally, and use really flowery language when writing to each other, and for their affection for one another, and that kind of thing, and just how that was normal, and no one thought anything about
Are
it
you
back
talking
in the
about this
day.
book?
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
think I still have this book.
Oh yeah, I have it too. Yeah, yeah. Is that the Picturing Men book?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yep, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, I still have that. It's
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
it's fascinating, and now it's just, that kind of, that's just, that behavior just gets so stigmatized, and a lot of people like to point to homophobia, and it's like, yeah, sure, but at the same time, I think it's just also people are just really afraid of being labeled, and rightfully so, honestly, they
Yeah.
just don't wanna be
Yeah.
labeled by other people, even by more progressive-minded people will do a lot of labeling, and I see a lot of, folks trying to label a lot of those photos as like, "Oh, those were historic gay couples," but even though most historians say like, "Well, being gay back then in a gay relationship back then was way more dangerous, and you don't wanna provide smoking gun evidence by taking a photo of it," you know?
Yeah.
So, it's either way, I just find that but, now in our minds, in our present day cultural minds, that's just that sort of behavior is seen as like, "Oh, that's only inherently gay, and only gay men do that, only gay men act that way," and that kind of thing, and so it's just, I just find that endlessly fascinating. I just think that that's just really, really interested me, and, I mean, one thing I do every year is I make, these, Christmas cards for a lot of my guy friends. I call them bro cards, and basically, they're custom drawings that I make. Yeah, and the idea is that they're cards that guys can give to their guy friends without feeling awkward or weird about it, and so it's kind of one of those things where I wanted it to have like emotional impact, but at the same time I want it to be accessible, if you will. It be
Yeah.
accessible and like kind of have a masculine look to them, but also like not stereotypically so. I also didn't want them to be too schmaltzy and feel like a Hallmark card too much, and but still wanted them to feel heartfelt and that kind of thing. But even with that, I shouldn't feel insecure about it. Like, but the one thing I wanted to do to like make sure it didn't look like gay couples in the cards was I would have like if I have several men, if I wanted to have guys like with their arms around each other, I had to do more than two. Basically, I had to make a group of guys, like three or more, sitting together, close together,
My
shoulder to shoulder with their arms around each other, and so it looks like a group of guy friends. If you only have two, if you only have the rule of two guys, then it just again, in your cultural modern consciousness, you instantly think, oh, gay couple, you know. But of
yeah.
course, I wanted to avoid that. So in order to avoid that, I have to make more than two guys sort of snuggled up together, and doing that, trying to shake off that stigma. So it's an interesting balancing act whenever I make those cards every year, and it's but it's fun to do, and it's an interesting experiment out. It's shaping up gender norms, but doing it in an interesting way and creative way. Be creative and unique, and challenge those gender norms with without just like turning men into women, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely all about cultural context, and, me and my roommate, were super affectionate with each other, so it's not like, we don't see it as weird, we see it as normal. I never, like, experienced that. I mean, um I think it's because what's different is because for both of us, we both grew up with people assuming things about our sexuality. So we just said that we're going to authentically express ourselves without internalizing other people's judgments. Because I think when we do that, we kind of limit, how we just naturally express ourselves. And some people are just naturally more affectionate, some people aren't. But if you feel like you have to like suppress that, then that's more of like a fear kind of response based on, the culture or how what culture says that you should behave. But I think a lot of men need to just overcome that fear and to, kind of like what you did is like give cards to your friends. I do the same thing, for Christmas. So it's not like I just show like my appreciation for them.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's great, and, that is hard to, get past that stigma about what people think about you. It's hard for anyone to do that, you just can't help it. You don't wanna be labeled, and you just can't help it, you
Yeah.
know? You just can't help it not wanting to be, mislabeled or misunderstood or that kinda thing, and, sometimes it's just it's hard to get past that. It really is. It's genuinely really hard.
Yeah, it can be. I think a reason that is difficult is because, um and I talked with, like, my professor about this on, I had her on the podcast, and she was saying that, like, for men, there are a lot more rigid roles than women. For men and how they express themselves are a lot more there's a lot more, rigidity when it comes to how we just show up and how we can be authentic.
Mhm. Yeah, that is kind of a funny thing, like, in our culture, women can be really physically affectionate, and for whatever reason, they don't
Yeah,
get labeled as lesbians for some reason, they just
exactly, yeah.
yeah, so it's kinda that is kinda interesting, there is that double standard.
Some women can verge in terms of fashion, they can sometimes have um, more variability in how they dress themselves, or men, even if it goes as far as like, me wearing pink, it's, oh my goodness. But, women sort of can, wear different things. Like, if you've seen a woman wear blue, you wouldn't question their identity. But if a
Right.
guy does it, then if a guy wears pink, then it's like a thing. So there is a sort of little bit of a double standard when it comes to how genders express themselves.
Yeah, and again, I'm no fashionista, but I think guys really need to step up the game in how they how they dress these
Yeah.
days. Although this is my biggest pet peeve that drives me crazy. I'm so tired of seeing guys nowadays wearing gray sweatpants. Like, I am so tired of gray sweatpants. I think they look slovenly. I just think they look so slovenly. Looks it's dull, it's drab, and I just wish that, guys would put a little more thought into what they're wearing and looked nicer a little bit. And, in my case, like I'm not exactly a flashy dresser, but I like to dress in a way that, still looks kind of neat. And I do get these shirts from these online retailers that I found and that I really like. They have like these patterns on them that sort of look like tree lines and stuff like that, and, they do stand out, in a way like I don't see anyone else wearing these. Everyone else might be wearing, like, a generic graphic T-shirt or something, but I like and I like it. To me, it's just one of those things where it's, like, kinda has, like, have a bit of a subtle kind of fashion statement going on where it looks cool. It doesn't at the same time, it's not, like, over the top and flashy and called attention to itself, so, so I kinda like that, but either
Yeah,
way, I mean, I wish guys would do away with the gray sweatpants.
I'm definitely like a fashion person where, I wear different, I wear more like a lot of like bright things. Like I wear, bright blue, bright pink. There is an aspect where men, whether through like socialization or just trying to blend in, that there is just like, the hoodie and then the sweatpants. I could never do that. That's just not my style, unless I'm like super lazy and I'm just don't care. But I like to, be more mindful about how I appear. And I don't know if it's like, I don't know if there's a change a little bit with Gen Z. I think after COVID, a lot of people kind of just, because we were like inside, a lot of people definitely just kind of didn't care as much. But I think it's starting to change a little bit with, you know, I know Zoomies, is popular among my generation, the store. Gene is popular as well. You know, there's different things that are kind of like fashion trends, but I think in a general sense, I am sometimes, like, upset that men don't have more of a variety whenever we, like, because 'cause I'll, like, go shopping with my friends, and then I'll see that, like, in the men's section is just so, like, limiting. I'm talking about H&M, but I don't know if it's not like that everywhere, but just
Mhm.
it's just kind of it's interesting, but, um
I mean, I understand the wanting to blend in sometimes. I remember I was very much in that mindset, like, in my high school days and everything, and,
Mhm.
you don't wanna be made fun of or anything, but I guess sometimes that mentality kinda continues with guys, like, into their 20s and that kinda thing. Because I remember in the early 2000s, like, I remember the masculine, kind of style back then for teenage boys. It was always, I mentioned the cargo shorts. It was always khaki cargo shorts. That was the thing. It always had to be khaki cargo shorts. It went all the way down past the knee. And then you had like those polo shirts. A lot of guys wore polo shirts back then for some reason. And they also had like those sort
Interesting.
of they sort of had those pre Justin Bieber haircuts, but they were a little longer though. They were kind of longer in the back. I don't know how you describe it, but there was that. And they also wore those sort of beige Crocs. So it was that fashion get up for all the regular guys in high school back in those days, and I just remember even back then, I remember kind of thinking like these guys kind of all what's the word? They all just kind of blend together. They all look the same. I can't tell them apart, because
Yeah.
they all had that look basically.
Well, first of all, a lot of those trends were kind of like I see those trends now, like with especially with the cargo. The cargo is definitely like a new trend that I see a lot of people doing. But I think, with the popularity of, like, online retailers that a lot of people are, especially in my generation, like, it's super normal to just go on Shein and get something that, like, caters to more of your style. So I think there's a lot more diversity a little bit now that I see. You might still have people that are just still dressed like the stereotypical sweatpants and sweatshirt, but now it's like more there's more like variability. I think because of with online retailers, people have more options.
Yeah, true. Because whenever I go to like, I mean, I hate clothes shopping in general. That's just me. Especially going to the mall and going to the clothes store. I just loathe doing that. I guess you could say that's more of a stereotypical masculine trait for me, I suppose. I don't know. I just something about it. I just really don't like. Um, and part of the reason is actually, because like there's just rarely ever anything I see that I really like there and or stands out to me. But yeah, it's online retailers. I've seen a couple like ads on Facebook and they were, had pictures of clothes that I thought looked cool and I was like, "Oh, wow, I like that. I like the tree
Hmm.
line on there. That looks cool." So, I really liked that and and of course I had to make sure this was like a legit website, and it wasn't a spam thing or whatever double checked, and yeah, it's like, okay, this is legit. Yeah, and I bought a bunch of shirts, and yeah, really, I like that. I'm like, okay, great. Now this is like, this is my style. So that's yeah, you do get a little bit more freedom that way, thankfully, with that kind of thing. You get more of those specialized trends and everything. So
Because I think like just for so long that sort of that rigidness that's kind of has kind of harmed men in a little bit. I think you mentioned in your article that rigidness affects their ability to socially connect,
Mhm.
and that can be harmful.
Yeah. I mean, and people are talking these days about the men's loneliness epidemic, and I'm like, well, yeah, absolutely. I totally believe it that it's a thing, is, a lot of guys are socially isolated and again, there's like again, a whole lot of, norms that are kind of preventing them from doing that. Basically saying, I mean, there's that whole aspect of suppressing your emotions, and then there's also that whole aspect of like, oh, real guys should be seeking a girlfriend or seeking women to be having sex with. What are you doing? Waste your time with guy friends or that kind of thing. Or once you get a wife or a girlfriend, you don't need anyone else. Yeah, that's all you need is just your girlfriend or your wife or that kind of thing. I actually did some art pieces at my school dealing with the men's loneliness epidemic topic. I was terrified of bringing it up to them because these are like ultra liberal women, ultra liberal. I was just so terrified they were going to rip me limb from limb for talking about the men's loneliness epidemic and being like, "Hey, you're promoting the patriarchy. How dare you say that men have it bad in any way?" Or, I mean, none of them said it.
Really
Yeah, I mean, none of them
interesting.
said anything, or at least I had to be. I was careful on how I worded things. Although I did remember, like, overhearing one girl saying something to the effect of that. Like, "Oh my gosh, there's so much talk about the men's loneliness epidemic, like, are you kidding
Yeah.
me?" Like, and acting like it was really stupid, and of course, that's another environment where I felt like I had to really keep be careful what I said, but at the same time, I felt like, "No, I really feel it's important to, like, express this. This is a I really do think this is a cultural, societal issue. I wanna express it through, like, the artwork that I'm doing, and, so but I was careful about how I worded it when I was presenting my project to the class. So it's like, so the theme is kind of about the loneliness epidemic, which just happens to affect men. Anyway, said that really quick
Yeah.
and just went on, so it's I couldn't help I know there were probably some of them that were seething on the inside and probably judging me quite a bit, but I didn't care. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. So
Yeah, I think there's definitely, like, a double problem with, recognizing that there is, a loneliness epidemic, but when we actually mention it, then we don't get like, men don't get the reaction that they actually need, they like, even, like, if, like, discussing it, then we expect support, but, like, instead we get, like, those shutdowns
yeah.
and, like, kind of like the minimization of it, but, the reason why that is talked about is because it is, um and it is an issue, even though like, even if it's, like, talked about, like, heavily, it's still, a significant issue, and I
Yeah.
think when people aren't able to talk about, like, in, like, safe context, then that's it just creates more problems and not being able to, talk about that, so
Yeah. Well, again, it's kind of sadly, it's a sad reflection on our divided cultural, socio-political climate. Like everyone thinks, there's no in between. You have to be on this extreme or the other, and nothing in between. One side is right, the other side is 100% wrong, and everyone has that attitude. But no one wants to be moderate, look at the, moderate points of view, the gray zones, the in between, or anything like that. It's just like, nope, my side is 100% right, your side is 100% wrong, and just embracing those. But yeah, the black and white extreme mindset, on just about any issue these days, unfortunately, and it's just which is again why it's difficult to talk about these things. Because like I said, I was really worried that bringing up the men's loneliness epidemic, I would be instantly shut down and labeled, oh, misogynist, patriarchy, toxic masculinity, blah, 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 kind of thing, And it wasn't an unfounded fear, I mean, I think it was legitimate. So, but then again, I
yeah.
wasn't, I wasn't trying to be friends with any of them. I mean, none of them were my crowd. So, I really shouldn't care. But at the same time, yeah.
Yeah, and, so another question I have is how, so the organization of your other brothers, how have you seen, men that are a part of that community, how have you seen them kind of, um, go out of the typical gender norms of masculinity? How have you seen like, in healthy ways, how have you seen that? Or they're expressing their, authentic self, but it's not a stereotypical masculine.
Yeah, well, last October, yeah, October we had our oh no, it was at the end of September, sorry. Yeah, we had our retreat, our yearly retreat and everything. Now, one thing that I see a lot, there's a lot of guys being extremely physically affectionate with each other throughout the whole retreat, and arms around their shoulder, holding hands, snuggling up together in some of the chairs while the worship service is going on and all that kind of thing. And it was just really nice and or having big long holding hugs and being really affectionate and all this stuff going on. It was very beautiful to see. And it's just, it's nice to see like on one hand we can throw off the shackles of masculinity, or strict masculine norms, I should say,
Uh-huh.
about how men are to interact with other men, but also like the judgments of other people, like, since these are all same sex attracted men, like the judgments that, "Oh, this is some gay orgy," or something like that, and it's just but it's just no, no, it's just, I think that they're expressing what really ought to be. I was seeing what really ought to be the way it is in the world of men. Like, I think what it really should be for all men,
Yeah, I think
and
it's
yeah.
mhm. I think because it's not, like, the cultural norm that people go the other way and say, "Okay, this must be," like you said, like an orgy, so they, like, sexualize it because they can only see it in that, like, compartmentalized lens where they're not like, they can't see it as just, "This is an actual human need," like, "This is social need," like, actually, like, it's, like, a definite social need that need to be, like, held, that need to be touched, and, like, the need for that, like, social connection as a social need, but people don't, like, think of it as like a social need. They think of it as this can only exist in this context, and like if it's like outside of that, then it goes against my like internal my internal bias or like preconceived notion.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other issue is like we live in such a highly sexualized culture where pretty much any interaction with anyone is often seen, with suspicion. And, and I think it's just for a lot of people, it's just again, it's another social norm where we just see, people being physically affectionate, emotionally affectionate with other cannot be like it's literally impossible outside of a sexual relationship context. And like it's just seen as impossible or maybe even immoral or wrong or what have you, and that kind of thing. But again, they won't examine any other aspects of that. Like, well, what about when parents interact that way with their kids? Does that automatically make them pedophiles or they're abusing
Yeah,
their kids, or or that kind of thing? Or all sorts of things. But I think again, it's just kind of uh, again, it's kind of product of being in a fallen world and like and good things get corrupted, good things get stigmatized, things that are inherently good, they get abused, they get and sadly, people have done that, abused that and abuse these good things, and now they get this stigma attached to them. And I think in my blog I wrote it for men, with the stigma men how they interact with other men. I worded it as eating the apple from the tree of knowledge of gay and straight, if you will, because it's like I mean like in the past when men were affectionate with each other, like I think that a lot of that was because they kind of had no concept of homosexuality back then, so they just didn't know about
yeah,
it. Similar to how Adam and Eve, they didn't realize they were naked, and that's
yeah,
just they just thought that was just the norm, if you will. Then God says, who told you you were naked, and because they didn't realize that until after
yeah.
they'd eaten the fruit, and
That's a
so
that's a
yeah,
good analogy.
yeah,
'Cause, people, didn't have a concept of they didn't put things in, like, categories, so they
mhm,
didn't, like it was just, "Okay, I'm just gonna, say I love you to my friend," and it just wasn't, like, a category, but because, like, over time we, like, categorize so many things, and even, like, you mentioned, like, affection with children, like, I was super affectionate with the kids at my summer camp, but, like, to, like, people that are looking at me, they're like, "Okay, this person's, like, now it's just seen as, like, you can't even be affectionate with children, and I love the kids, so it was
mhm,
just seen as weird, but, yeah, it's just we put things in, those categories, and things can't just exist as naturally as they are. So, it's very interesting, but also it definitely, like, encourages me to, step outside of that, uh like, even with, like, the podcast, it's not it's not seen as, like, typical for men to discuss their, like, emotional or mental health, and, the friends that I've made through the podcast is kind of like that's, like that runs the majority of our conversations, but outside of that, it's just not normal. It's like I've experienced that so much where I talk to, like, other men that don't have that, I'm like, "Huh?" Like, you don't you don't have friends checking in on you, and it just goes to show, like, how, like, uncommon it is, but
mhm,
uncommon doesn't mean weird. It just means that it's mostly geared toward the culture, and if we can kind of, poke a little bit at it and just kind of challenge it, then hopefully other people will come after us and see that this is healthy and normal, and it contributes to our, well-being as being whole humans.
absolutely, and I think we need to model that example and show that for other men it's okay. But like I said, you kinda have to be smart about it and
Yeah,
don't just flip gender norms on their heads, without thinking about it,
yeah.
throwing men into dresses, or what have you, or it's just you have to be clever about it. Kinda like what I was trying to do with my Christmas cards, just you have to be, yeah, just be clever about it, be thoughtful about it. Challenge the norms that need to be challenged, but at the same time, don't just, flip them on their heads and pat yourself on the back for being so smart or brave or whatever, Just gotta, do your research and hopefully good things will come out of that, and hopefully men will be in the future men will be have less smothering gender norms to abide by. So
I have a Hispanic friend, and like, every time I get off the phone with him, he says, like, "I love you," and I guess, in their culture, it's definitely normal to express that, but and that it's very interesting, like, even, like, within different cultures,
Yeah.
how that is.
It's actually funny. I was mentioning I was a baseball fan. Ironically enough, it seems like men being affectionate, physically affectionate in whatever ways, it seems like it's always extremely tolerated in the sports context.
Mhm.
Like when I watch baseball, those guys are hugging each other, they're smacking each other's butts. They're all over each other physically, arms around the shoulder and all sorts of stuff, and showering naked together afterwards, and men doing that in any other context is labeled as gay or homoerotic, and yet they're
Yeah,
doing this on full view on camera and in front of crowds of thousands on the field, being that physically affectionate, and it's just it's beautiful to watch, but at the same time, I'm like, what is with this double standard that's only allowed and accepted like in a professional uh pro sports context? But I guess like maybe in a lot of people's minds that like, if you're a pro athlete, it goes against Newton's
yeah,
laws of physics that there's no way you could be gay, or something like that.
yeah,
So it's like so there's absolutely no suspect of what the motivations could be, I guess. But it is an interesting phenomenon where all that kind of behavior and affection is no one talks about it. No one says anything. No one makes gay jokes or anything like that at all. It's normal. It's which I find to be so bizarre and find really fascinating. And the same with like Hispanic cultures. A lot of times you will see I mean, the white players are too, and the black players, but like the Hispanic players can be really physically affectionate. Like when Albert Pujols played his last season with the Cardinals, he was really close friends with the catcher Yadier Molina, and they would just be all over each other a lot of the time. I mean, giving each other big, long hugs, holding each other, and all sorts of things like crazy, just unbelievably physically affectionate with each other, and it's just, and again, that's just such a bizarre double standard that I see in our culture that, no one's going to talk about this. No, everyone's just really, no one
yeah.
notices this. So
Think within the sports context, people associate sports with like intense masculinity that is just kind of like, we're not going to say anything about this because it's just sports, but it's just, I don't know. I don't get it. So like as humans, like we find it easier to put things into categories and to compartmentalize them rather than seeing things as more natural and more nuanced. So I
yeah,
think it's just like it's easier for us, even though it doesn't always make sense
yeah.
with the double standard.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, it is kinda weird, like I said, yeah, people kinda have these black and white views on sexuality or masculinity and femininity, and there's these kind of glaring, contradictions here and there that no one talks about, so and again, like I said, it seems like that sort of thing is tolerated only in both a military and professional sports contexts, and those alone, nothing else, so
Yeah.
it's interesting. I mean, I'd love to see like some serious sociologist out there do some sort of work on it, but I don't know. I'm not hardly seeing anything, unfortunately, but I'm like, why not? But anyway.
Yeah, just me it's funny because me and my roommate, we kinda just don't care, we're just affectionate, and just like other people that I've met, they have like, they're I think it's more about people being secure in their own masculinity. If someone is not secure, then they're probably going to default to more of the stereotypical gender norms, but, my Hispanic friend and, people like my roommate, seeing them secure in their identity, they're able to express love, express, affection, and just, do things that are outside of the norm. Like my roommate, he likes musicals. So I think people are, when they become more secure in that. So maybe just like maybe like these rigid gender boxes and the rigid categories is a sign that men are not either secure or affirmed in their own masculinity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So I think that might be, like, more of, like, the culture is definitely a factor, but I think it's more of, like, an internal thing, like, if you're probably gonna, like, overthink more if you're not, like, secure in yourself, or you're gonna care more about how people perceive your identity or sexuality if you're not, secure about it. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of men, like, truly are truly not secure in their identity or haven't been, like, affirmed because they think masculinity is something to be achieved, and
Mhm.
I think that because of that, then they, like and they say, "Okay, like, to perform, I have to perform this identity so that I could be validated." So that's my theory, I don't know.
Yeah, over there's also just that fear of being labeled and trying to avoid being labeled as
Yeah.
much as they can. It's just, in a lot of ways, I don't blame them for. I completely understand. So, yeah.
But yeah, this was an awesome talk, and the blog definitely made me, challenge and think about gender norms. Again, this isn't saying that we're not like when we're talking about discussing gender norms, we're not saying that men should just dress up, wear dresses or high heels or like anything like that. But we're saying that the nuances and the gender norms could be questioned, and that there can be more freedom to be expressed when we invite nuance.
Yeah. Nuance is the key word here.
Speaking of high heels, what's coming to mind is didn't, I think, like, in, like, what was it, like, the early presidents did that? I was just
Yeah.
reading something recently about, like, how they were, like, wearing like, they had to wear wigs or something. It's just interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, like, well, I think that was actually kind of more of a French thing. I think they did wear high heels, but I think
Yeah,
that was because they had to. I could be wrong. I could be getting this wrong. And I think it was because, like, since they rode horses, like the high heels were designed to fit into the stirrups or something like that. I could be wrong though. I mean, something like that. But yeah, yeah. Again, yeah, it's sort of again kind of interesting contradiction where we look at how people dressed back then, and nowadays we would consider that kind of feminine or flamboyant, or if you will. So it is
yeah, so
interesting.
we're just saying that, how you express yourself, it should be, geared towards more, like, who you are, and, like, an example for me is, I like to take and collect, Polaroid pictures, and that is seen as a feminine thing, even though for me, there's a lot of meaning to me taking Polaroid pictures because, it's just something like I could keep and hold physically instead of just like scrolling through your phone for photos. So there's like an art to it. But people, although I think it's kind of changing because like I've met some other men that have that hobby, and they're like the most
Mhm.
masculine men that you could like. So at least
Yeah.
maybe like in my generation, Polaroid's like the new cool thing.
I think all guys kinda need that affirmation. It's I think they do need that subconsciously and need that kind of validation, especially I mean, I think we are designed to have deep connections with other people of our own gender and have that connection and that intimacy and, I think we are designed for that. And and the threat of losing that is kind of, it's scary. It can be really damaging if you kind of feel rejected by that group. So again, understandably, it is understandable why some guys would retreat to being more stoic or blending into the crowd and that kind of thing. But at the same time, it's just an ever struggle trying to like find that balance in between both the extremes and everything. Hopefully culture will change so guys can find that connection in a meaningful way that's not surface level or or shallow or that kind of thing.
Well, this was an awesome conversation.
Thank you for having me on, Micah. It's been a great chat, and yeah, enjoy talking with you, and hopefully we'll get to talk again sometime soon and talk about some more masculine things. All right, awesome.